Welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! History with Joe Giorlando. In today's video, we are going back to Chaos Return format, one of my favorite formats, and taking a deep dive look at what I call Tundo FTK. I refer to this as Tundo FTK, although many players just simply call this Royal Magical Library FTK, because the player that first popularized this deck and was featured in coverage both in terms of feature matches, but then also deck profiles, was a gentleman named Vincent Tundo. He piloted this deck to a 7-2 record at the 2006 US Nationals, just missing out on the top cut, which is important to note during this time period meant a top 8 playoff, not a top 16, top 32, or even top 64. And as a result, really popularized what's one of arguably the most powerful FTK decks during the early stages in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Technically, you could play this deck slightly modified in GOAT format the year prior. You would just have a different endgame. Your ultimate concluding portion of the turn would involve Black Pendant plus Reversal Quiz, a type of FTK strategy maybe someday we'll profile. The particular version, though, that Vincent Tundo played at the 2006 US Nationals utilized a newly released card from Enemy of Justice, Life Equalizer. Life Equalizer is this unique card where if the difference between both players' life points is 8,000 or more, and it's a trap card, both players reset down to 3,000 equal life points. How this deck would actually get there is a combination of Archfiend's Oath, Tomb World if necessary, and then of course cards like Upstart Goblin. The combination of all of those three cards, when combined with Royal Magical Library, Convulsion of Nature, and Giant Trunade, would ensure that you drew your entire deck, created that 8,000 life point discrepancy, and then in the standby phase of the opponent's turn, when you activate Life Equalizer, you then combine it with Blasting the Ruins, which conveniently does exactly 3,000 points of damage if there are 30 or more cards in your graveyard, would ultimately result in a quick, I call it an FTK, everybody calls it an FTK. Technically, your opponent gets to experience their draw phase, but the two cards, Blasting the Ruins and Life Equalizer that you have set, are going to end the game regardless of what they have. Now, in order to actually get to that point, as I alluded to, this deck revolves around Royal Magical Library. Royal Magical Library has always been one of the more combo-centric cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, allowing you to add counters every time you activate a spell, remove 3 to draw a card, not once per turn in any capacity, and the ideal set of spells that you actually activate in this particular deck are pretty unique, ones that really don't see any play at any other point in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Convulsion of Nature and Archfiend's Oath are the pivotal two pieces to the combo. Convulsion of Nature literally says both players take their deck and flip them upside down. What that does is it allows both players to see the top card of each other's deck. What the point of that is when you combine that with Archfiend's Oath, you can literally pay 500 life points, which is what Archfiend's Oath allows you to do, and call the top card of your deck. If it's right, you get to add it to your hand. Well, you're always going to get it right if you can literally see the top card of your deck, meaning that every copy of Archfiend's Oath is essentially a free draw. They both, however, are also continuous spells. When you combine those two continuous spells, in addition to that Tomb World when necessary, with Giant Trunade, it facilitates this engine where when you activate Giant Trunade and bounce all of these continuous spells to your hand, not only are you consistently adding spell counters to Royal Magical Library and drawing cards that way, you then get to reactivate all your continuous, continually activate your Archfiend's Oath, get free cards off the top of your deck, and reduce your life points, which is very important. Again, remember, Life Equalizer, there needs to be that 8,000 point discrepancy between life points, and between the 500 life points off Archfiend's Oath and the 1,000 life points that could be paid for every copy of Tomb World that needs to be activated along the way, with also Upstart Goblins, you can very easily facilitate that 8,000 life point difference while also drawing your entire deck, always drawing into Life Equalizer and Blasting the Ruins, sending them, passing to the opponent, and destroying all of 3,000 of their remaining life points after the Life Equalizer resolves in their draw or standby phase, and ultimately winning the game, although not quite on the very first turn. All intents and purposes, the game is over on the first turn. One of the coolest decks of all time, really one of the only FTKs during this window of Yu-Gi-Oh's history that got that close to a top cut, and for me, one of the most memorable decks in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. But without further ado, we're going to take a deep dive look at Vincent Tundo's 2006 Tundo FTK deck. All right, first we'll start with Royal Magical Library. This is the most important card in the deck. This deck literally cannot win unless you draw Royal Magical Library, so we absolutely need to see this, ideally on turn 1 going first, therefore we can FTK. This format, even if you go second, there's not a ton of trap cards that people typically use. I mean, there are cards like Torrential Tribute, Book of Moon to an extent, that can stymie the OTK if you happen to go second, but there's not a lot in the format. You actually can reasonably OTK going second even if your opponent summons a monster. This isn't modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Where they're going to put up a bunch of negates. They're going to summon a Mystic Tomato instead of Sakaratsu armor. So 3 copies of Royal Magical Library, and then everything else is just to support when we draw Royal Magical Library, actually pulling off the FTK or OTK, depending on if we're going first or second. The only other monster that we run in the main deck is 3 copies of Thunder Dragon. Thunder Dragon basically just gives us great discard fodder for card destruction and Graceful Charity.
Going on into the spells, which for this deck is obviously going to be quite a lot. Basically everything but 2 singleton trap cards will make up the spell lineup. So we have 3 copies of Giant Trunade. This is probably the most important spell. Obviously you need cards to bounce to your hand to make this really powerful, but this deck needs as many copies of Giant Trunade as possible, because we're not only going to use these 3, we're actually going to recycle it through the game with cards like Spell Reproduction in order to bounce all of our continuous spells to hand and then replay them, allowing us to add counters to Royal Magical Library. And if they're the ideal continuous spells that we'll talk about in a little bit, actually draw cards along the way. We have 3 copies of Magical Mallet. That's, historically been a pretty obvious inclusion in OTK, FTK-based strategies. It's sort of an upgraded version of Reload, which this deck actually does elect to play a single copy of Reload. I'll actually dig that out now. So we have sort of 4 copies of that. It's a negative one, but it refuels our hand. Sometimes with Thunder Dragons, obviously there's a risk of drawing the Thunder Dragons in the aftermath of this, but it at least gives us a chance at a new collection of cards, and then with Thunder Dragon, it kind of mitigates the negative one if you never see them again, or at least don't see them until later on in the combo. This card's going to be kind of interesting. Pigeonhole and Book of Spells. This is a quick play, and basically all it does, it looks at the top 3 cards of your deck and allows you to rearrange them. That's all it does, which doesn't really sound all that powerful because it doesn't even replace itself, but when I get a little bit further into the spells, it'll make a little bit of sense why that card's included. We have 3 copies of Spell Reproduction. Ideally, we are utilizing this to bring back Giant Trunade, right? We want to use Giant Trunade as much as possible, so we basically have 6 copies of a Giant Trunade. And then comes the most important continuous cards in the deck. We'll start with 3 copies of Convulsion of Nature. So what this card does is it takes your deck and it flips it upside down. So what that technically would then mean is, if this was your deck, it would literally flip it so that both players could actually see the top card of the deck. Why that is so powerful is that the other continuous spell that we're running is Archfiend's Oath. What Archfiend's Oath allows you to do is pay 500 life points and declare the top card of your deck. If it is the card that you declared, you get to add it to your hand for free. It's a once per turn effect, so it's not like you can just pay your entire life points down. But with Convulsion of Nature face up, you actually get to see the top card of your deck. Therefore, this is an automatic pay 500 drawer card. The synergy here is that this is a continuous spell and this is a continuous spell. So when we activate Giant Trunade, it bounces these continuous spells to our hand, allowing us to replay them, and in doing so, add counters to Royal Magical Library. Once this gets going, it's really hard to stop in the sense that once these Giant Trunades get rolling and the counters start going onto Royal Magical Library, and you're using Giant Trunade to bounce 2, 3, or even 4 continuous spells to your hand, that's automatically 1 spell activation on Trunade, the 4 activations off of the continuous, that's a draw right there. You draw 1 more spell off of anything from that iteration, that's another draw. The Archfiend's Oaths then are draws, right? These are not hard ones per turn, so every copy gets to be activated again and again and again, and eventually you just get through your entire deck. In order to kind of support that, we actually even play 2 copies of Card Shuffle. Can you believe this? You pay 300 life points and you shuffle your deck. That's it. It's a continuous spell, once per turn, pay 300 life points, shuffle your deck. Why this card is valuable in this strategy, as odd of a card as it might seem, is it's a continuous. Continuous are, just by virtue of sticking on the field, valuable with the deck with Giant Trunade and Royal Magical Library, but it also allows us to, if we see the top card of our deck is actually being weak, we can shuffle it away when we have Convulsion of Nature, right? We see a dead Royal Magical Library that we won't be able to summon, or one of the 2 trap cards that this deck has to play. We can just shuffle it away, see a new card, allow us to continually activate continuous cards when we have Royal Magical Library and the Giant Trunade combo going. Then we have 2 copies of Upstart Goblin because it is limited to 2. We would obviously play 3 if we could. We have the Toon package, so we have 3 Toon Table of Contents and a singleton copy of Toon World. So Toon Table of Contents, obvious, you just search more copies. It's an instant Royal Magical Library draw when you have 3 copies in your deck. Toon World is actually valuable because this deck needs to reduce its life points to a certain threshold in order to actually FTK the opponent, and as a result, the 500 life point increments that you get off of the Archfiend's Oath can get you part of the way there, but not always all the way there. Being able to activate Toon World and actually bounce it to your hand with Giant Trunade can actually be what's necessary to drop your life points low enough to win the game. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. I'm going to have to make some more space for some more spells. There's so many in this deck. But next we have Graceful Charity and Card Destruction. So these ones are pretty obvious inclusions. If they are legal in a deck like this, we are definitely going to play them. Graceful Charity is going to be played in every single deck in the entire format. It is arguably one of the greatest cards of all time. Obviously in a deck like this, where we're trying to FTK, the ability to see 3 fresh cards is just absolutely incredible. It also gives us a great card to discard with the Thunder Dragons. In addition to that, it can actually put Royal Magical Library in the graveyard, and this deck does elect to play a Premature Burial. There's sort of a backdoor way of either having double Royal Magical Library going. Honestly, there is even a way theoretically to get triple Royal Magical Library going, because when you Giant Trunade Premature Burial, it doesn't destroy the monster. So if you've actually got 2 Royal Magical Libraries in the graveyard, a Premature Burial, Trunade combo can actually put all of them on the field. That is way, way, way overkill, but it is something you can do. Obviously, card destruction is amazing in a deck like this. We have one copy of Heavy Storm, which doesn't actually synergize with what this deck is trying to do, but it does give us a little bit of resistance when we do have to go second. A copy of Level Limit Area B. Level Limit's a valuable inclusion, although it doesn't outright draw cards. It does stall, and with Giant Trunade, it is a continuous, so even if we go first, we can activate this and at least activate a spell that gets bounced to our hand, and then can sort of theoretically over the course of the game contribute to a draw off of Royal Magical Library. So it is valuable there. It, also, if we don't FTK, it is one of the more ideal cards to end on, right? This format isn't a format where we've got a ton of back row removal. You have MST, you've got Heavy Storm, which are basically in everyone's deck, but you might not have more than 3 or 4 pieces, so it can actually stall out if your opponent doesn't actually have the ability to combat it. And then we have the actual win condition. So we have a Life Equalizer and a Blasting the Ruin. So basically what these two cards do is, once we pass to the opponent, so I guess we technically don't actually win on the first turn, but we win on our opponent's draw phase essentially. But what you essentially do is you pass to the opponent, and if the difference between both players' life points are over 8,000, you activate Life Equalizer and it resets both players to exactly 3,000, and then Blasting the Ruins deals exactly 3,000 damage if you have 30 or more cards in your graveyard. The way you actually get above that threshold is by using Upstart Goblin. Your opponent's going to be at 10,000 life points, which means to actually achieve the 8,000 difference, you only need to drop down to 2,000, right? You hear 8,000 difference and you think, well, isn't that just the difference between 0 to what you actually start at? Yeah, but your opponent's going to be at 10,000 because of the upstarts, and if you absolutely positively need them to get them higher, you technically have the ability to do so. But that's not really realistic. What you're realistically going to be doing with this card is activating it because you have activated 2 of these, and you've activated some combination of Toon World and Archfiend's Oath, and then by the combination of these 4 cards, you actually go well below the threshold of 2,000 if you need to. And as a result, in the draw phase, you reset both players to 3,000 and then just deal 3,000 points of damage through Blasting the Ruins, winning the game. So there are, I'm not going to call them bricks in the sense that they are explicitly necessary to win the game, but you do not want to see them in your opening hand. You kind of want to draw them once the engine is basically to a point where it's unstoppable, and then at that point, you're confident that you're going to win the game. You really don't want to see them early. Do not actually contribute to winning the game in the early stages, but they are essentially the only 2 one-card individual cards like that could pull this off, minus there are some reversal quiz versions of this deck that you could play, but you still need 2 cards. You still need a Black Pendant and a reversal quiz. The versions of this deck that you see play in GOAT format, sort of the revamped versions in GOAT format, we see a little bit of that, but at this point in time, I think this combination is a little bit better. But that is our main deck. Obviously, we're playing an FTK, so we're only going to play 40 cards. There's no extra deck. You should obviously have an extra deck. Cyberstein was legal. It was a relatively popular card, all things considered. Some people teched it in Chaos decks. Some people actually played OTK decks. So you want to have an extra deck just to present the illusion of actually going into it. You also do want to present the illusion of potentially siding Stein. You could theoretically side 3 Cybersteins. You're already playing 3 Giant Trunades. It's not inconceivable that you could do that. In terms of the format, so I don't have an extra deck built. That's kind of what I'm alluding to there. In terms of decks of the format, maybe some random burn decks, not all that popular. This is Chaos Return format. So we're going to see Chaos variants. We're going to see variants with Chaos with Kaiku and Banisher. We're going to see Chaos versions that have Recruiters, Chaos versions that have Return, Chaos versions that have Decree. Maybe some other combo decks like the Mirror Match, and there are other types of combo decks. I'm going to put a Cannon Soul to represent that. And then maybe Stein OTK decks. But really, your anticipated matchup is just a variety of Chaos decks, right? If you're going to that year's Nats, you're expecting to play all Chaos decks, which makes this side deck really weird because if you actually look at the deck, one option is to totally smokescreen into something else, like a completely different deck. But these cards really have no application in anything else. Like I could side into a different kind of OTK, but I don't really think you get any value from doing that. And there are way, way, way more than 15 cards in this that have virtually no value whatsoever. And even then, I'm holding cards in my hand like Toon World and Toon Table of Contents that really don't do anything. Giant Trunade really isn't going to do anything. Royal Magical Library probably should get sided out. This is more than 15 cards right here, which makes it really, really challenging to realistically side. So I put together a side deck that, is very narrow in what it's for, because not only do we not want a side deck, not only are there not enough cards in the main deck that would be left over. There's way too many cards we'd have to side out. The second you start siding out engine cards and cards that are just spells, you start to lose the light code of actually FTKing when you get going, and you definitely don't want that. So I have 3 copies of Lava Golem here. Spell Canceller wasn't popular, but if someone is going to play a card like that against us, I guess it doesn't hurt to have Lava Golem. One thing that I thought of was if your opponent's really smart, they'll summon Cyberstein and just activate it to bring out Dark Bolter, which is basically game over. I put Death Wombats here. Honestly, if our opponent's playing a burn deck, I'd actually kind of rather just keep the FTK because I think we have a better chance of FTKing them than having any concern whatsoever about them dealing damage, but I do have those here. I have a Nico Bane King for kind of a mirror match style deck. Your opponent plays card destruction, opponent plays a card that makes you discard and you can ditch that. I put these here because they are continuous spell. Well, this one, rather, is a continuous spell. This one is Nightmare Steel Cage. But basically what these cards do is they stop your opponent from attacking you. I don't think this deck needs to do that, but I put it there. 3 Threatening Roars, just in case we play against Tundo FTK, but honestly, if they Stein us, it's hard for us to win anyway, so maybe that doesn't even matter. And then a single copy of MST, this deck has a bunch of back row removal. I actually spent about a half hour trying to build a coherent side deck, and I don't even think this one is that great. Honestly, our game plan is to FTK. We do not care about what you are doing. We don't have any realistic way of countering it that allows us to maintain the integrity of our deck. So why even try? All right, now we're just going to see if I can get an FTK just to kind of show off what this deck does. I have given myself Royal Magical Library because, if I don't draw it, I'm just going to pass, and then, that's not fun. So we're going to just give Royal Magical Library into the opening hand. Give the opening hand Magical Library, give it a good shuffle, and we'll see if with 5 cards plus the library we can actually win. So we've got Pigeonhole Book of Spells, Thunder Dragon, Upstart Goblin, Giant Trinade, and Convulsion of Nature. So this is, it might not look like much, but it is actually a reasonable opening hand. We're going to first start with Thunder Dragon just to slim our deck. We want to get the Thunder Dragons out as fast as possible. So I think it's probably better. So obviously we're going to summon Royal Magical Library. In terms of what we do then, the options here are to use Upstart Goblin, Convulsion of Nature, or Pigeonhole and Book of Spells. I think it's better to use Convulsion of Nature to actually see what the bottom card of my deck is. Okay, we definitely want that. And that gives us a counter. I was thinking that I could use Pigeonhole and Book of Spells and kind of see 3 deep, and that would give me a little bit more insight because then I could Upstart Goblin a card to my hand knowing one of the top 3, as opposed to playing this first and then this. This just gives me more insight into sort of what's in my deck. There's no debate that I want that card, so I'm going to play Upstart now so that I can draw this, and then I can Pigeonhole Book of Spells looking 3 deep and actually see a different card down there. That way, when I use Pigeonhole Book of Spells right now, this puts me to 3. I'm actually going to get 2 of these top 3 cards. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Interesting. So I think I'm going to get probably just a Spell Reproduction. Oh, this is in graveyard. Yeah, we'll give myself Spell Reproduction, and then I'll use this to draw that. And then I'm going to activate this, giving myself a first counter. I will use it. I should put Mallet next. Yeah, this is what I meant to do. I'm going to call it and say Mallet. So I've used that effect. And then here, I think you just go Giant Trinade. Yeah, it doesn't seem like I need to do anything else. These go back to hand. This goes to 2 counters. This goes to the graveyard, and this gets reflipped. So I don't really want Giant Trinade. So what I'm actually going to do is play Archfiend's Oath first. That way this goes to 3, and then I got to draw off the top of my deck. Heavy Storm, that is not a very good draw. I might use Magical Mallet to shuffle my deck, because I really don't want the Pigeonhole Book, the Premature Burial at the bottom. That doesn't do anything. So what I think I'll do here is I'll go Magical Mallet, giving myself a counter on the Royal Magical Library. And I think these 3 cards are the worst by far, because I don't need Heavy Storm. We're going first, and it's not great to put Thunder Dragons back in your deck because you obviously don't want to draw them, but I'd rather get a little bit more action. So we draw 3 new cards. Okay, we saw our Trinade. So the fact that we drew Trinade probably means we're going to win. That card is that powerful. But now we'll use the Dragon to get the last one out of the deck. Okay, we're going to do something similar where we use Convulsion of Nature now. So we'll see the bottom card. Okay, Tune Table of Contents, that's awesome. So we'll use our Archfiend's Oath. I'm going to use the die to represent that we've used it. Add this to our hand. That card is incredible at the top of the deck. So I think I have 2 counters on this because of the Convulsion activation. Hopefully I'm not lying. But we definitely want Graceful Charity. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 cards, 7, 8 cards. Yeah, I think I've activated 8 spells. It's these 4, and then each of these twice. Yeah, I'm at 8, so I have 2 counters on this, I believe. So I haven't used Reproduction. Okay, so we need to activate a spell. If I activate Giant Trunade, I don't get to draw this off the top, but then I can use Archfiend's Oath with it at the bottom. So I actually think playing this is probably fine, though I maybe don't want to do that because I have this that can get me into Toon World. That would actually give me an additional 2 spell activations, because if I Trunade Toon World, it's really valuable there. So maybe the play is actually to use this and then look 3 deep and then draw it off of the Royal Magical Library and then do this. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna go 3 deep. All right, these are all bad. Okay, leave it the way it was. It's 3 counters. Use the 3 counters to give me Graceful Charity, the best card in the game, basically. Now with a fresh, I'm going to activate this, and this is actually really good because I'll be able to go activate, activate, and then put Toon World in my hand, and that's just 3 spells right there. So 3 spells on top of here. Shuffle the deck. Use the 3 spell counters to draw Pigeonhole and Book of Spells. Okay. Now we activate Toon World. It's a counter. The deck is actually upside down. That gives us some insight. Do we care about reproduction? Reproduction is actually really good. I might actually activate this in case I dig into another Archfiend's Oath. So we'll draw 3 cards from here. 1, 2, okay. Shuffle is good too. We don't need this. And we probably don't need Mallet anymore, though I guess Pigeonhole and Book of Spells isn't that great. I think I'm at 2 counters because of the Graceful. No, I'm at 1 counter. No, I'm at 2 counters. 2 counters. The Toon World was an activation. So the options are Mallet. I think Mallet's probably better than Pigeonhole and Book of Spells, though I think it's going to be hard to lose from here. So maybe I just care about making sure the top of my deck is good, because I'm not going to really want to shuffle any of these cards back. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So that and that. I'm going to use Pigeonhole and Book of Spells here because I don't want to draw this. That way the card that I draw off this is one of the top 3 cards, and then I can use Card Shuffle and then Giant Trunade, and then I should be in a decent spot from there. So these top 3, okay, we'll definitely take that. Put that on top. That's the 3rd counter. We'll remove the 3 counters to draw the Oath. Activate the Oath to make this 1. And then here we go, Giant Trunade, and add all these back to our hand. That's the 2nd counter. So the top, just so we remember, it's Magical Mallet. So we're going to have to discuss here if we want to bring Mallet to our hand. All right, so I don't think Mallet is all that necessary, but it's, you know, it's probably an above average card to draw. It's a spell, at least, for reproduction. So maybe we do want it. But the card below it is the Life Equalizer, so we actually don't really want that one. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to play Archfiend's Oath, because that's a guaranteed activation in this post-Trunade environment. Use the 3 counters to get a fresh card off the top. Okay. Not the best, but that's okay. Not the best, but that's totally fine. So now what we're going to do is we will use another Oath, because it's just sort of a guaranteed activation. I could do the Card Shuffle play, where I shuffle the Magical Mallet. Activate brings us to 2. Activate Convulsion brings us to 3. And then I'll pay the 300 life to shuffle my deck. So right now I have a draw off Royal Magical Library and 2 Archfiend's Oath activations, plus the ability to Trunade twice. So I'm actually in really good shape. So this is actually upside down. Use the free draw. Yeah, I'm going to just start using these. So I'm going to flip them upside down to represent that I use them. Activate to draw another card. And now we're at the point where we can just start using this. We don't really need another copy of this, and we don't really need this anymore. We just want to bring back Giant Trunade and add that to our hand. That's a counter on Magical Library. Trunade is now in our hand, so we've used both of these. We don't want to activate this. Obviously, that's 5 Spell and Trap zones used up, so we're going to activate this. I haven't been doing the math. The only thing to note at this point is that it might be better to activate Toon World so that we lose enough life to actually get Life Equalizer to work. Note that Spell Reproduction is the bottom card, which is actually a really good one. That's 2 activations. So I'm actually going to activate this now to put this to 3 so that I draw the Spell Reproduction, because although I know I already have one, it's anything that can just guarantee Trunade we want. So I'm just going to add it. I know I'm going to want it. All right, so that's 1 activation. Another Oath for 2 activations. Convulsion of Nature is an unnecessary one, so we're actually going to activate this and then shuffle. That's 3 counters, and I'll get a free draw at the end of this, so we'll shuffle. We'll draw, okay, Convulsion of Nature. We'll use use this to draw this. We'll use this to draw this. Okay, we have another Trunade on top, which is great. We have double reproduction anyway, but we do have it on top. If we ever do card destruction, we could actually premature burial the Royal Magical Library. We're not going to need to do that because we basically already won, but it is something to note. So here now we're going to use spell reproduction. You have to discard spells for spell reproduction, which is definitely something that is important. We'll get rid of Convulsion, and we'll get rid of Reload. Oh, another Convulsion. You know, eventually Magical Stone Excavation would be released. That's not legal at this point, so we cannot Stone Excavation and discard monsters, unfortunately. But we added Trunade, played Trunade. I don't know if I've been keeping track of those, but I don't think it's really going to matter. We want spell reproduction, so we're going to activate Convulsion so that we can flip this around. This is 3 counters at least. Add the reproduction. All right, so Trunade's obviously great, so we'll just go activate, activate. If we need to burn more life points, I am keeping track, right? We have to get below 2,000 or less, having activated both upstarts. We've only used 1 upstart, so we do need to dig into the next upstart or get the life points so that we're at 1,000. I'm just going to assume that we have been doing well with life points and play this card shuffle. But now that's 3 counters, so we're going to remove them to get Trunade. Get a free draw. Mallet is fine. Get a free draw. Upstart's actually very good. We need that. So we have, I'm just going to flip this upside down to count. We have 6 cards left. I don't think there's any way that we can lose, so I don't think drawing that's that big of a deal anymore. So I'm just going to use the upstart because we do actually need to draw it at some point. And then we can do Trunade. I think we're at 2 counters at least. I haven't been keeping track anymore because we're kind of at the point of hitting the critical mass. But between the upstart and the giant Trunade, I remember activating those. This flips down. We don't want to draw Heavy Storm, so we'll use this one first. Goes to 3. Use it to draw another Oath. Yeah, we've been doing this with 2 Oaths. Imagine what happens if we had all 3 Oaths. Even better. So that was just 2 spells. I don't really want to draw the bottom card, so I'm actually activate, no, this one. We'll use this one. Flip it. That's a free draw. That's a draw. That's a draw. As you can see, we just drew our whole deck. So now what happens here at the end of drawing our whole deck, the life points are whatever it needs to be. We've activated Upstart twice. I imagine we've burned our life points, and if we haven't, we can still use this to bring back Giant Trunade, and we still have activation of Toon World, so we can lose even more life points if we need. And each of these are 500 a pop, so we've used these a bunch. But here's what happens at the end of it, right? So you've got all of this going on. You do need to clear your back rows, actually. So one interesting thing that I haven't commented on is at the end of this combo, you do need to, if you haven't already done so, either Heavy Storm the field, which can be important to actually clear out the back rows, or Giant Trunade them. Heavy Storm is actually important in the sense that you need 30 cards in your graveyard, and if you leave all of your continuous up, you might not actually reach that if you end with 6 cards in hand plus 4 back rows. So you do need to get down to the critical mass. That's why I just Heavy Storm. Now I can set both of these, and between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards, there are 32 cards in my graveyard. My life points are lower than 2,000, or at least 2,000. My opponent's life points are at 10,000 because of the double upstart. In the standby phase or the draw phase, I get to activate this, reducing my opponent's life points to 3,000, and then this to deal exactly 3,000 points of damage. So there you have it, a Royal Magical Library FTK. Granted, I had to give myself Royal Magical Library, and maybe I made some mistakes along the way of keeping up with the counters, but I think for the most part, the decisions were probably okay. It's been a while since I've played this deck, but hopefully they're all right. You can definitely critique them in the comments below. I really enjoy. As annoying as it is to play against FTKs, I think it is interesting to think about some of the sequencing decisions about, do you Convulsion here? Do you Archfiend Zeal Fair? So definitely comment below if you would have played that the same and gotten to the same outcome. But nevertheless, that's Giorlando for Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Thank you for watching. Check back soon for plenty more Yu-Gi-Oh! content.